Hi everyone, thanks for checking out the new video on the Stories of Latter-day Faith channel. I'm Emma, the host, and today I'm so excited to share my interview with Hayley Clark, who is a fantastic, amazing person. I already knew that before I interviewed her, and now it just like confirmed it, getting to talk to her. She is a business owner. She runs the Honeymark Swimsuit Company, where she helps with designing and selling swimsuits for people who appreciate modest swimwear. So definitely go check out her company. She didn't pay me to do that. I just want her to get all the business because she's fantastic. So, disclaimer for this video, I had the flu when I did the interview and was definitely had a fever. I definitely had a fever of like 101. And Hayley did amazing at putting up with just how not all there I was. So don't pay attention to me. Definitely pay attention to her and her story. And thanks for watching the video, and don't forget to subscribe and like, and please share this with anyone that you think it would be helpful for. Well, without further ado, Miss Hayley Clark. Hello, thank you so much for coming and agreeing to share your story. Um, I am very excited to talk to you. I really love your content on I follow you on Instagram, but I always found your stuff really inspiring. So
Oh, thank you.
it's very much an honor for you to come talk to me. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. No, I am the one. I feel so honored to be talking with you. I love your story. So I just really appreciate you having me.
Well, thank you. Well, so why don't we go ahead and start? If you could just tell me a little bit about your background, like where you were in life before you were a part of the church, kind of what was going on, and just go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was baptized at age 18. And it was actually 2 days after my 18th birthday, but I kind of have a like 5 year lead up story to when I actually like from when I learned about the church the very first time to when I actually got baptized. Um, but my life had a lot of like ups and downs. I will tell people that I was pretty actually like inactive in a way. Like I felt like I was going to church when I was like 13, 14, and then when I was like 15 and 16 I really didn't. And then when I was 17 it's like I came back almost in a way, if that's the best way for me to describe it, I guess. But um before I joined, I definitely felt like something was missing. I was not a member of another church like at that time. So my history really is that I grew up in a family who occasionally went to an Episcopalian church. We had like a pretty good like neighborhood with other people that were going to that church. So I think that was just the one that we decided to go to. And I was like 7 when we stopped going. We would go mostly for like Christmas and like Easter. Like I remember going on all of the holidays. And then we had moved when I was like 9 from that house to another house into a different neighborhood. And I had a friend whose mom went to another like non-denominational Christian church. And I was like, oh, I'll go with you guys. I think I was always looking for something. I always had an idea of like right and wrong. I had an idea about Jesus Christ and I just wanted to know more. It just felt good. I'm a feelings person. And so when I would go to church with them, I would just feel really good. But that lasted for a couple of years. She would just bring me to church with her. It was never anything like my parents would do with us. And then when we moved again, I met friends that were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that was really how I learned about it. And then we moved to Utah, which is, the LDS, it's the hub, right? And so it was kind of it was not really ever a matter of if, but when. I had a lot of friends who were like, I know like eventually it'll come, like when it's the right time. And I think they had a little more faith than I did. There was a lot of days I was like, no, don't you tell me what to do. But eventually like it happened. And I actually really loved those like 5 years from when I first learned about the church to when I was baptized, because I feel like it really like grew my testimony and it helped me to become truly converted to Christ, and not just like, oh, my friends are doing it, so I'm going to do it too.
Well, we have some similarities because
I love that.
I did 5 years, 4 years before I finally joined, and it was on and off too.
Yeah.
So, hmm.
Yeah.
um, so it sounds like you didn't really know much about the church before you were first introduced. Like you didn't
No,
have
I
any like
didn't.
preconceived
Yeah,
notions.
isn't that crazy? And I honestly, I look back and I'm like, how did I not know? How, but I realized later on that I went to like a dance studio with other girls that were LDS, and I just, just didn't really know. I don't know if it just never really came up because it wasn't, because we were in Washington at the time. Um, I don't know. Like it's one of those things I'm like, I just think for me, timing was everything. And I think it was better that I didn't know anything about it, because for me it was just church, just like how I went to church and my friend went to church, and it was just church. But it really was so different though. Like I had so many questions. I would ask my friend, why don't you have a cross on your steeple? And why, I don't even remember what other question, like you just have all these questions. And she was so great. She would kind of just give me her answers, but then like guide me to the scriptures, and let me know like why they were different and how many like missing pieces that this church had, that like just made sense. It just made sense to me more than any of the other ones. And still, when you're like 14, you kind of, I don't know, you think you know a lot about stuff, but it really made me realize like I don't really know a lot. And that was actually one of the reasons that I didn't want to get baptized. I would tell people like, "Well, I just don't know enough." And they'd be like, "But you do. You know enough. Like you know enough. And you'll learn more as you go." And not always what it was, a little like scary for me, I think, at first. But I think I loved that I barely knew anything, and what I did learn right off the bat was just by looking at them and the things that they were wearing. So a lot of what I share in my space is about like modesty and um just the way that I think we look. And I talk about that because that's what influenced me from the very beginning. It's what like really caught my eye, was my friends were dressing very differently, my LDS friends were, than other people. And they weren't doing it in like a I'm better than you kind of way, but in definitely like a this is what we believe in, this is what we stand for. And I was so interested in that. I was like, that like feels good. That feels right. And so I actually would like change the way that I dressed because I wanted to dress more like them. Because it just felt good, if that makes sense. So anyway, that's really what I knew, was like they dressed differently, they acted differently, they didn't buy stuff on Sundays. I really didn't know anything about the temple. They would take me to stake dances with them, and I just was like, oh, these are so fun. And then like I like now looking back, I'm like, oh, the temple was right next door to the stake center, and I just had no idea. It's one of those like I didn't have eyes to see kind of a thing. I just thought, just another building, I don't know. Like it is really interesting to look back and think how much I didn't know versus like how much I know now, and kind of like what I was missing. But again, I think that's what I needed at that time before I actually joined.
So it sounds like your first impressions were pretty positive then.
Yeah. Yeah, they really were. There was one time when these cute missionaries who just like really didn't know me they happened to be over at my friend's house, and I'll never know if that was intentional or if it just really was a coincidence. Um but I was probably 14 and a half. I might have been 15 at the time. I don't really remember, but they were just talking, and they kind of did the diagram of like the V and then the upside down V, if you've ever seen that, where it's about like rules, where if you start out with like all of this freedom, and then it can kind of lead to like bad things, basically, where like, and so what, like they were kind of just saying like, well, if you choose to like use your freedom in a bad way, then you'll like end up in jail. Like that was just kind of the extreme. And then it was like, but if you start with like rules, and you start with keeping things like being obedient, right? And then you'll have more freedom at the end. And I was like, yeah, but like, what if I just don't choose to do bad things with my freedom? And they were like, well, and I was like, yeah, I don't know about this. Like, you guys are funny, because I have family, like I don't come from like a rough family, if that makes sense. Like my family life is really good. My family's all just really content with, and they're good people. Like they're just solid. They just don't believe in the same church that I do. And so it was one of those things that I was like, I don't know about that. That was really the only experience that I had that may have been negative, other than when I moved. So when we moved from Washington to Utah, and I was so mad at God. I really didn't want to move. And you're in the middle of high school. You just are this angsty teenager. I was like, I don't want to do that. And I just thought it was all God's fault, and really looking back, I'm like, man, you were the best. That was the best thing that ever happened to me, was him picking me up and moving me right to Utah. But it was one of those times where I was so negative towards everybody else, and I put kind of these negative vibes out there, that a lot of people who could have been my friend and kind of could have taken me under their wing didn't even have the chance to, because I had so many walls up. And even then, there were still people who were like, I'm going to be your friend, even though you're kind of mean right now. Like they were really nice to me, even though I wasn't. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think I haven't really had like a bad experience within the church. I think more than anything, it was either like me and it was my perspective, or it was like a misunderstanding. Like I've just never really highlighted like a terrible experience, I guess, with members, especially. Yeah.
So, what made you? So you were investigating for about 5 years, on and off. What like pushed you over the edge? What said, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna get baptized.
Yeah. There's a couple experiences that I always like refer back to. And the first one was when I was like 14, almost 15. And I had actually had a friend bring me to girls' camp with her. And I was like, I've never done anything like this. Let's go and just see what it might be. And when we were there, we were standing in the forest and we were singing, Heavenly Father, are you really there? And I just had tears pouring down my cheeks. And it was a time that I was away from any other influence. It was a time when I was just felt so connected to heaven, that I was like, this has got to be true. And I ended up, like, I think it was a couple days later, they had like the testimony meeting the night before we left. And people, whoever wanted to, wasn't everybody, but people that got up and wanted to bear their testimony, they did. And I was like, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to say something. And I was like, what am I doing? And I like basically bore my testimony, and I was like, I don't know why I feel this way, but I feel this way. And like, there's something in my heart, and everybody's crying. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I go home and I tell my mom, like, Mom, I want to get baptized. And so I could have right then, after 2 years of maybe like investigating, essentially. And she was like, no, like, I think you're on a camp high. I think you just need to like chill out for a little bit and maybe come back to it. Like, we'll see, kind of a thing. And then, so of course, life happens. I got busy. I just like didn't really go to church with my friend anymore, on and on. And then we got that. My dad got the job opportunity in Utah. And so I was like, well, no. And now I'm really mad. I don't want to do that. And so, yeah, I was kind of away for a little bit. My senior year of high school, I went to a different high school than my junior year when we first moved here. And those friends really were the ones that were like the best ever. They were so great. And they would like bring me to church with them. They would, like, one of my friends was like, do you just want to come over and watch general conference? And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? Like, I brought a journal to take notes. Like, I think I was really yearning for something. Like, I'm really good at like knowing what truth is. I'm really good at being able to like, just, like I said, I'm a feelings person. I'm like, I can feel it. And so I think, again, probably around that winter, I asked my parents, can I get baptized? And they were like, no, we still just don't really like agree. Um, and then I had the opportunity to go with that same friend who invited me to watch General Conference with her. She brought me to the Draper Temple open house. So I was able to go to a temple like inside and walk through it before I was ever even baptized. And it was definitely like probably the moment that when I was sitting in the ceiling room and I was looking in the mirrors and watching how they talk about like it's like a symbol for eternity. And I, again, same thing, just like my tears were just flowing, my heart was beating so fast, and I was like, I know, like this is where I want to be. Like this just feels so good. This is it. Like this has to be it. And so I asked, and that was like in March. I asked my parents again if I could get baptized, and they were like, no. So it was a couple more months, and I was like, I'm just gonna have to wait till I'm 18. And I didn't turn 18 until August. Like I was young for my grade. So I was after I graduated high school, it was right before I went to college. And I think it was a lot of like a few big things and a lot of little things that just kept me on that path to where like I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I actually almost went to Boise State University for college, and while I was there, I had made the dance team. This is such a funny side story. I just think God really does just know us. But I had made the dance team, and I really wanted to get out of Utah. Like that was my plan. And especially, right, like you apply for colleges at the beginning of your senior year. And at the time I was like, I don't want to stay in Utah. This place stinks. And then I like made a bunch of friends and I had a really good time. And but so then I was like, well, I got in, I made the dance team. Like I'm going to go to this, Idaho school. I guess that's my new life. And I get there and we're standing there about to take like team pictures. And the girl next to me, for whatever reason, I just asked her, like, hey, do you know if anybody on the team is LDS? Like, do you know of any LDS churches? And she goes, I'm LDS. And like she just like looks at me and she's like, what? Like, what? And what are the chances? Like, we had never talked about it before. It just was a weird, I don't know, it's one of those weird experiences. But meeting her, and like she kind of took me under her wing and we were kind of friends. And but then I just had some things happen with my friend groups in Utah, and she must have said something in Idaho about like me getting baptized, because something in my brain was like, if I go to Idaho, I will not, like, I don't think I will actually get baptized. I don't think I'll do that. And I don't really know what it was. Anyway, the end of the story goes that I ended up not going to Boise State. I'm in all the dance team photos from 12 years ago, and I never actually went to the school. I ended up staying in Utah, and I got baptized, and I ended up just going to UVU. But I really just think if I had left, I don't think I would have gotten baptized. I think something like might have happened, or like there was something in there that God was like, no, I've got to redirect you and you've got to stay here. And I did. And so that's that. It finally happened. But like I said, I think I loved those 5 years. I really did. Like, because I think the up and the down really did teach me that like the up is where I want to be, right? Like, and the up was when I was going to church and I was studying my scriptures and I was at the temple. Like that was how I knew, really, was that I had those low moments and I was like, what am I doing? What I'm in these low moments, I don't want to be here. And so what am I doing? If that doesn't involve the church, great, I'm going to go back to church because that's really where I want to be.
Funny how it all works out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Um, so why the Latter-day Saint Church? Why not a different church?
Yeah,
Like what's specific
it's a
about it
great
for you?
question. And it really is, because it's like there's so many churches out there, right? Like I always think of Joseph Smith's story when he's like, right, like he prayed to know like which church on the earth is the right church. And like unfortunately, like none of them were at the time. And again, I think this for me, it was one of those things that just made sense. It felt different. And I had experiences in other churches, like I said, in an Episcopalian church. I went to another non-denominational church with my friend. um I'm sure I went to like a few other churches, even just growing up, just with different friends and stuff, and just none of those like I did. I was not sorry. I'm like, I'm remembering now. I had another friend that I would go And probably like we were in like 7th grade maybe, and I would go to church with her. And even that, like it never felt like the right one. And I don't even know if it was intentional that I was looking for the right one, but that's what this felt like. It it was that. It just was. And I loved that I had friends in Draper and friends in Sandy and friends in Provo and friends in wherever that were all going to the same church. And like my friends in Washington, right? Like it was all the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It wasn't like St. Bede's Episcopal Church, St. Paul, St. whoever, right? Like it was the same. It was, which makes sense to me because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Like that makes sense to me. Not to mention like everything else. I don't like the temple was a huge one for me that I was like, this makes sense. Having this eternal perspective, like that just makes so much more sense to me than just what's here on earth. Being able to do work for the dead, those who have already passed. I think that was a huge thing for me. Like there was just so many things that I was like, this is different enough from everything else, but also it makes more sense than anything else that I've heard. And that's really, I think, what led me to this church instead of any other.
So, what is different about your life now compared to before you were part of the church?
I mean, like a lot, which is crazy, right? Like kind of a lot, kind of not. Um, I feel like the biggest difference is I guess I would say my perspective and my focus. I think before I joined the church, I really didn't focus on eternity. I wasn't focused on Jesus Christ. I was very much focused on myself and here and now and what am I doing for me? It was a very like selfish mentality and a very like right now mentality. Whereas now it's like my focus has totally shifted to what sign am I giving to God? What am I doing for him? How can I bring Christ into my life? How can I tell my kids about that, right? Like it's just it's all about Christ for me, and that really is the biggest difference because I just didn't have that when I was growing up. I really didn't have that desire before I joined the church. And I think I definitely have realized that like everything I've done has been because of like his hand in my life. And I love being able to look back and reflect on that. Whereas I didn't used to do that before, right? It was kind of just like, well, I got here and now I'm here and I'm just floating around in my life, like it was never anything concrete where this is so concrete. And my weeks kind of just are the way that they are because of him, because I go to church on Sunday and I go to the temple once a week and I say prayers with my kids at night and I read the scriptures and I study conference talks and I do podcasts like this, like, right, like this is it's extremely different. And I always say if I'm ever like posting about my conversion story or when I got baptized and things, I always say like I don't want to know what my life would be like without the gospel of Jesus Christ, without the church. Like I really don't, because I don't think it would be in a very good place like for me personally. I just think I would not be doing very well if not for the gospel of Jesus Christ and if not for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Was there anything that was difficult to like adjust to?
Kind of think of like the most difficult thing. Honestly, I think, is it bad if I say no? Like it's one of those things that like I think all of it's hard. Like I think genuinely like giving yourself over to God and letting God prevail in your life, like that's hard. Listening to the prophets can be hard. Like deciding that this is what I'm going to do when the rest of my family isn't doing it, that's hard. Was there one specific thing? Like I didn't ever really drink. I didn't smoke. I didn't do drugs before. Like I said, I tried to dress like my friends in high school, and my friends were LDS. So I even like the modesty thing wasn't really hard for me. Going to the temple, I love, like, it's one of those things that I'm like, in a way, it wasn't hard for me. I think it's a struggle every day to just try to be better and not have like an imposter syndrome. But the aspects of the gospel have not really been hard for me.
Can you say more about the imposter syndrome stuff?
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
Yes. No, I love it. So just being a convert, even though I had those 5 years, like I said, I always was like, I just don't know enough. And I still feel that way. There's a lot to know, not only like the stories in the scriptures, which I've been thinking so much lately. I follow a lot of non-denominational Christians on social media because I love how like vibrant and bold they are. And especially like I love their conviction of Christ. Like I love how much they love him and how much they want to tell people about it. I'm like, I want to be like that. Like I want to be like that. Maybe not cause contention, but I want to do that to a point. And I have been thinking a lot about how they are so bold and they know so much. They know the scriptures. They know these things. And I think a lot of that, this is my personal perspective. I haven't ever really talked to anybody about this, but my personal perspective is that they know so much about the scriptures because that's what they have. They have stories about Christ to dive into, which is kind of, in a way, it's kind of old news, where we have a living gospel. We have ongoing, a church that is constantly being restored. We have a prophet who is receiving revelation daily. We receive personal revelation daily. Like if we'll ask for it, right? But along with that, there's so much, right? Learning about not just the Bible, not just like the Holy Scriptures of the Old Testament and the New Testament, but learning about the Book of Mormon, which we've been asked to read every single day. Learning about the Doctrine and Covenant. So learning about Joseph Smith's history, because a lot of attack that comes on the church is about the history of the church. So it's good to know about the history so that we know the truthfulness, right? And what that really entails. And then also studying the talks of the living prophets and apostles and understanding more about them, and then understanding about temples and trying to, like, there's just a lot of aspects. I have a few friends who have left the church, unfortunately, and they have said things like it's a very high demand religion. And I can see that, but I also like how incredible of a blessing it is that we have so much. We have so much that we get. Like a lot of other, all the other churches, they don't have that, right? Like they don't have this ongoing restoration that we do, but also it is a lot. So it's one of those things where I get a lot of imposter syndrome because I'll post about something and somebody has a question and I'm like, well, I think I know about that, but like, let me research, like I genuinely second guess myself, which I think it's just a insecurity thing. Because again, like if we use the Spirit to work through us, we don't really need to be afraid. And also, I think President Nelson is the one who said, good inspiration comes from good information. So learning more, like the more we learn, the more we know, the easier it is to share and to just be very confident in the things that we share. And then being confident when somebody asks questions or when we want to dive deeper into a topic. It's just something that I'm working on, rather than kind of, I think it's easy when somebody asks you a question and you don't know to just kind of like close off and be like, no, I don't want to talk about that because I just don't know. And I'm not going to research more because that's, it's just easier to not. It's easier to just kind of like, well, it is what it is. And I don't really know. So I'm just going to leave it to somebody else. But I think it's up to us to really dive in and put in that effort that President Nelson has talked about quite a bit when he says the Lord loves effort. I think it's up to us to really dive in and study more, because there's a lot to know, but it's all good. It's like good things to know. And I don't really, to me, it's not really high demand. I want to make sure I know that. I don't feel like it's a high demand religion. I feel like the Lord asks a lot of us because he knows our potential and he knows the things that we need to know. and we should want to know. Those are my perspectives.
I think that was very well said.
Oh, thanks.
Very well said. Thank you. um, yeah, I've heard that term before, the high demand religion, and it's like, okay, sort of, but also no.
Right.
Like, if your heart's in it, it's not high demand at all.
Totally.
Right.
Totally. Yeah. There's a quote I think I just read today about obedience, when you start it as like it's just a discipline, it's hard at first, but then pretty soon you're missing whatever you're doing, right? It's like exercise. So like if you discipline yourself and say every day I'm going to wake up and just exercise for 10 minutes, then a couple weeks later, if you don't do that, you're going to say, oh, I miss it, like I want that. So like discipline turns into kind of this discipleship after a while, and you start to love it, you start to want it, you start to desire it. And so if we can start by being obedient and being disciplined, and then like leaning on the Lord rather than just like, well, this is the checklist I have to do, but you lean on the Lord and say, these are the things I want to learn while I'm doing this, and give it meaning and give it intention. It becomes not so high demanding, but more about this like wealth of knowledge that we get to learn and we're able to learn. And again, what a blessing it is. But I do know for some people like that, it can be overwhelming. But also I think that's why we just learn line upon line. It's also not supposed to be this overwhelming thing all at once. And I do think it's up to us to kind of compartmentalize and say, well, I'm going to focus on covenants. And if something else comes up, I'm just going to focus on covenants because I want to know more about that. And then if the Spirit guides me to something else, then I'll go into that. Like it's up to us to, I think, also make sure we're not getting outside of that line upon line. And I think we need to make sure that we're listening for that.
Definitely. So I just have one last question. Time flies, right?
Yes.
So if someone was investigating the church and they saw your video, what would you want them to know about the church?
I would want them to know that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the like restored gospel on the earth. It has the fullness. And I think it really does feel good when you come with an open heart and an open mind, and you're asking the Lord, you're looking for maybe the answers to questions that you've never had before. This is where you're going to find that. There's so much, because like the Lord wants so much for us. And I know we've kind of touched on this idea of like this high demand religion, but again, there's so much because he wants so much for us. Like, I'm like, that's really what I want people to know, is that like, we love Christ. I love Christ so much. Like, he is my savior. He's my redeemer. He's my advocate. He's my brother. Like, all I want to do is know more about him. And I know what he wants for me is the most important things. Like, and that's in this church. That is here. And you're not going to find everything that we have in the gospel of Jesus Christ, in this Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You're not going to find that in another Christian religion. You're not. And so if you're looking for more, this is where it is. And that is what I like want people to know. And it's not we're better than everybody else. It's not we have this and you don't, It's we want people to know that this, like, we have the gospel of Jesus Christ, the fullness of the gospel of Jesus Christ on the earth today. It doesn't necessarily mean that the Bible or the New Testament or whatever you're studying is incorrect. It's that we just have those extra things that other people don't have, but the Lord wants everybody to know about. And not to mention, we have a living prophet on the earth today. I'm like, that is the biggest thing. And the prophet who genuinely sees around corners, like he sees what's coming. He has done so much to prepare us. Why wouldn't we want to share about that? Why wouldn't we want other people to know about that? I know some people say like, we have missionaries and our members are like pushy and things like that. But I'm like, it's a gift that we want to share with other people. It truly has changed my life. I guess that really ultimately is it. If I could share anything, that it would be that this is the church that has absolutely changed my life. And I don't want to know where I would be without it.
Well, that was very well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we have 3 minutes and 46 seconds, maybe. Is there anything else you'd want to say before we wrap up?
I don't
It's
know.
okay.
Is there anything you want to say? I'm like, this is.
No, because I just, no. Well, so tell me, how did you get into the like clothing stuff?
Oh yeah. Honestly, I just kind of fell into it. I have always had an interest in clothing. So like I said, I was really interested in like what people were wearing growing up. And I used to refashion clothing. I used to go to the thrift store and kind of like DIY my own stuff, like fix collars and whatever, I don't know. And then when I moved to LA for a little bit right after I got baptized, and some friends were asking me, what would you do if you weren't dancing? And I was like, oh, I would design swimsuits. And they were like, oh, really? And I was like, yeah, I guess. It was something that I said that I just didn't really even realize. It was definitely one of those where like the spirit was like, that is what you would do. And I was just like, okay. And then yeah, about I guess it was like 7 years later that I really started designing more, just sketching stuff out, and then slowly just started just sketching more designs and being more inspired. And I always compare it to like Nephi and the boat. Like I don't know what I'm doing all the time, but I know that God is the one that's leading me and guiding me, and he's the one that's giving me this inspiration in my head and bringing other things into my life. Like I had 3 kids in 2.5 years, and that's really this idea of like busy motherhood is really what inspired me to design swimsuits for moms. And then now we're hopefully getting into like clothing for moms as well. I just think motherhood should be celebrated, and a lot of people just aren't taking care of us. And and so anyway, that's how I got into it. But again, I think it's definitely God's hand in my life has really made all of those things happen.
Well, Hayley, thank you very much for enduring me being sick. It's like I feel terrible.
No,
But
you're so
thank
wonderful.
you.
I appreciate you.
So this will probably go up maybe this weekend.
Sure.
Once I'm feeling better, I can
Yes.
record like a little
No
intro,
rush.
and I'll probably put some stuff on Instagram. You don't have to share it if you don't want to, but if you did, that would be wonderful.
I would
So,
love to.
well, thank you
I
again, and I'm
appreciate
gonna go
you.
and lay down.
Yes, go. I feel so bad. I'm hoping you go
No,
and
it's
get
not
some
your
rest.
fault. It's not your fault. It's my family's fault because I was
Oh,
in
of
Michigan
course.
and they got me sick.
Of course.
All
Okay,
right.
well,
Well, it was
thank
very nice meeting
you.
you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.